When people talk about the great scientists of the world, they often mention Einstein, Newton, and their contemporaries. But for me, Severus Snape is the greatest scientist who ever lived. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you why I think a fictional character from the Harry Potter series is one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. So first and foremost, we must understand what the characteristics of a great scientist is to begin with, and how Severus Snape fits into that picture, and why I am choosing him above Einstein, above Newton, as the greatest scientist who ever lived. For me, there are two things that distinguishes a great scientist. First and foremost, is his philosophy. And when I talk about his philosophy, I mean his attitude towards his work, his beliefs, his ideas towards the way the science is supposed to be done, what he sees as standard, what he sees as best practice, and so on and so forth. I think that Snape revealed his philosophy in the very first movie of the Harry Potter series. There was a class that was held when they were first years in school. It was a potions class, the very first class that Harry Potter and his friends took, and Snape was the potions master. It is what he said, his introductory remarks when he entered the class, that for me revealed his philosophy and distinguished him as a scientist. Now, why am I using a person's philosophy or a scientist's philosophy as the benchmark to, assess his quality or his standing? If you take your regular excellent scientists, people like Newton, Einstein, and co., these people were deeply philosophical people. It wasn't just about their equations and stuff. It was the way that they thought, the way they saw the world, what they believed it was possible. That is what allowed them to see the world in a different light. And so in the greatest of senses, their philosophy is really the secret ingredients that birthed their greatness onto the scientific scene. So back to Snape's philosophy. His remarks on the very first lecture that we see in the Harry Potter series, he flings the door open, walks in a very majestic manner, and he looks at his students and he says, there will be no foolish one waving or silly incantations in this class. And that's the first thing I want you to take note of. But then he continues and says, as such, because there will be no foolish one waving and silly incantations in the class, I do not expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art of potion making. However, for those select few who possess the predisposition, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death. It beats me that I've been able to memorize this, but I've just been wowed by that scene. So there and then, the philosophy of Snape is revealed. Hogwarts is primarily a wizarding and witchcraft school. People come there for the magical arts. They don't come there for the rigor of thinking and experimentation. And in fact, the words that he chose to address the students shows us how it's almost as if Snape had a certain kind of disdain for the magical arts. Even though he was a fine wizard by all standards, he calls the incantations silly, and he calls the one waving stupid. You understand? So clearly he's positioning himself as someone who prefers the scientific more than the magical. And not just did he show his preference of the scientific over the magical, but he's also positioning the scientific as even bordering on the magical, and in most cases even exceeding the magical, because he said that he can teach them how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses, not by magic but by potion making, by adding ingredients, by calculations, by putting in effort. So clearly Snape believed that the scientific bordered on the magical, and that in some aspects it is even better than the magical. So for me, that's what sets Snape apart. It's this idea that science is magic in and of itself. Think of it. You are sitting somewhere, wherever in the world you may be watching me on a glass tile in your hand, all because of the power of science. If someone went into the future from maybe the 1800s and went back and told them that YouTube will be possible, that it will be possible for you to watch someone hundreds of miles away, people would say this is the stuff of magic, and they will be right. So for me, science borders on the magical, and until a scientist comes to that place where he believes science to be bordering on the magical, to have something that is transcendent, something that is worth racking your brain about, worth the efforts of experimentation and failure and refining your ideas and going back again into the lab, for me that sets the great scientist apart. Even if you take Einstein or Newton or whoever it is, they are very philosophical, and their beliefs is what shaped their minds to see the world in a different light. But obviously we cannot just talk about the scientist's mind or what they believe or their attitude or their philosophy towards science. They must also produce stellar works, okay, that can distinguish them. For example, when people talk about Einstein, they talk about his equations, right? E is equal to mc squared. Also, when people talk about Newton, they talk about gravity and all of that. And I mean, all the other scientists who are held in high regard, winners of Nobel prizes and stuff, all of these people have something to show for. Okay, you can't just be a scientist and not push the boundaries of science forward. In Snape's case, Snape wasn't just a scientist who was deeply philosophical and passionate about the science. He was also very brilliant as well. He demonstrated his brilliance by creating spells, and what allowed him to create spells was the application of the scientific to the magical world. Spells aren't things that you create normally, especially across the wizarding world, as seen in the Harry Potter movies. Okay, they are very, very difficult and cumbersome things because a lot of things at play, and even when you end up creating a spell, it may not work as you intended to. But Snape created a spell called the Sectum Sempra, okay, and we first see that spell in action when Harry Potter used it on Draco Malfoy. Essentially, that spell cuts the person that it's used on. It cuts him into pieces and all of that. Snape's brilliance here is not even the fact that he created a spell, it's the fact that he created an antidote again to the spell that he created. For me, that is a demonstration of the scientific, because one of the things that sets the scientific apart from flukes is the fact that we have controls in experiments. So your ability to control all the elements that impacts the results is proof that you are doing science, and it's not just some trial and error, or you are not just lucky. So Harry Potter first found out about the Sectum Sempra spell in an old advanced potions book. Okay, he was taking Professor Slughorn's advanced potion class. He went late. He was with Ronald Weasley, and then 2 books left. One was old and one was new, and Ron chose the new one, so Harry Potter was left with the old tattered one. And that book, we will later find out that had belonged to someone called the Half-Blood Prince, and this Half-Blood Prince was Severus Snape. In Professor Slughorn's class, Hermione was one of the best students in all of Hogwarts, but even Hermione was struggling to make the correct potions. But Harry Potter was not struggling because he had Snape's copy of the advanced potion making. In that book, Harry Potter found detailed annotations that were Snape's own experiments. If you read the annotations in the book, there are times when, for example, the book will say add 6 or add 5, so and so together, and Snape will annotate no, add 15 or add 12. The book will say cut so and so into pieces. Snape will say no, crush it. You understand? He took the methods in his chemistry book and reinvented the whole thing. To have the courage to question what is inside a textbook is a demonstration of the spirit of a true scientist, because a textbook is an approved book. Before a school board approves a textbook as part of the curriculum, a lot of experts would have had the privilege of going through the content. You understand? So for a book to be approved for chemistry class, aka potions, and for Snape as a student, as young as he was, we don't know how old he was or how well developed his mind was, but as young as he was, if he was able to find newer ways to improve on the methodology of the exercises in his textbook by experimenting and finding new ways of doing the same thing, is a demonstration of the spirit of a true scientist. Snape, for me, will remain one of the greatest, if not the greatest scientist ever. Yes, he's a fictional character. Yes, he only exists as a figment of J.K. Rowling's imagination. But for me, if you look at modern science and its great men, the traits that Snape, demonstrated in the Harry Potter movies, very few scientists embody those traits. And for me, those are the true marks of a true scientist. First of all, their predisposition towards the science, towards the world, towards observation. And secondly, their ability to experiment, to push the frontiers of science, and to bring about new knowledge that transform lives. So, what do you think? Do you agree that Snape is the greatest scientist of all time? Let me know what you think in the comments. My name is Selassie, and this is Scholium. my commentary on important life themes that appear in film and in literature. Subscribe and become a part of this wonderful family, and I'll see you soon.